All right. So I asked Michael if this title was okay, and he said it was fiery, but it's literally what he's doing. We'll get to that. But to begin with, Michael, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in your work? And because you wear a lot of hats.
Okay. So I guess I start out with got into crypto around 2012, mining Bitcoin on school computers back when that was feasible and the ASICs hadn't taken over. So I really should be retired by now. But when you diversify your profits, they think that you think that's smart until you see how Bitcoin price moves over the last 10 years. From there, did a lot of consulting work in the industry, got my computer science degree, did a lot of smart contract development and architecture, spent a good 4 years at Open Zeppelin working on a lot of security audits and security concerns in the smart contract world. And during that time, over time, got to get more involved in kind of the policy space, first out of just personal interest, and then got to know Peter from Coin Center and did work with them on Tornado Cash, did some policy work in Texas, mainly on the side, and then recently joined Turnkey, which does wallet infrastructure. Happy to speak about that more later. But around that same time that career trajectory was changing, there was also a lot of discussion around the ramifications of the Tornado Cash case, specifically the criminal prosecution against Roman Storm, as well as Samurai Wallet. And there had been some projects that I had been holding on to that I had wanted to do for a long time, but watching the Biden administration was always concerned about. And we'll probably talk more about that later. But that leads me to, I guess, why I'm suing the DOJ, which is mainly around would love to deploy something without getting prosecuted for it.
Yeah. You also work with SEAL, don't you?
Yes, I do. I've done, through my work at Open Zeppelin, because they do a lot of security work in the space. They built one of the most popular smart contract libraries, which is intended to avoid code duplication and introducing bugs. I got to be involved in a lot of war rooms that overlapped with what SEAL was doing, and was very happy to get involved early on and work with Sam and Julia and Casey and a lot of the other people on the team. Right now, I probably focus more on the standard work than the incident response work. They tend to outpace me on the incident response front. I try to pick up a ticket, and they've already solved it by the time I see it on my phone. So did a lot of work with them mainly on how do you build smart contracts, securely avoid repeating past mistakes that we've seen. And then generally trying to just be helpful wherever I can. It's a motley crew of many different people in the space. I'm happy to be one of many.
You also sit on a few crypto security councils. It's kind of an obscure concept. So can you explain sort of what that is and what role you play in the security council?
Yes. So this is a very, you kind of think of like a board of trustees, if you want to apply it to maybe a normal kind of real world example, but in crypto, it's much more specific and technical. So usually in cryptocurrency or blockchain protocols, the idea is no one controls it. No one can, do an upgrade or change the code in such a way that it could introduce a backdoor or vulnerability. And that's a really strong property, especially in protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum, where if there is going to be a code change, it's a very long drawn out process. You're going to spend months, if not years, talking about it, implementing it. And then usually the entire network will have to participate in adopting it in a hard fork or soft fork. And that's usually highly coordinated with lots of nodes. But there are pieces of software being built either on top of Ethereum as additional rollups for scaling, kind of mini blockchains that borrow security from the main blockchain, or you're building smart contracts that are implementing something that is intended to be decentralized and immutable and non-custodial. But because these are new pieces of technology or they have lots of complexity built in, you do have to worry about the scenario where what if we find a bug in the code that we've written, you'll try hard as possible to find it before you deploy the code. But let's say you find something in production. This happens commonly. This is where SEAL typically has to hop in. And if you don't have the ability to change that code rapidly, if you have to go through that same long drawn out process to upgrade the code, well, then you're at risk because any public discussion of that is going to immediately tell hackers, hey, there's a bug here, go start stealing money. So what a lot of protocols do is they kind of try to, either they do this permanently or they do it as a training wheel phase while the code is maturing, is they'll have a multi-sig of it can be 5 of 7 or 9 of 12 is very common for rollups. And you say okay, we're going to appoint, let's say, 12 different people that should ideally be all coming from different organizations. Some might come from the protocol team that built this, but some might be security auditors, like Open Zeppelin sits on security councils. And then, and during my time there, I did some of that and then started to do it as an individual. The idea being you have lots of independent people that are all trusted by the community and they're technical. And if you ever had a bug come up where someone reported a bug to the team and they're okay, we've got to fix this. It's not just going to be the team that built the protocol or whoever's going to be responsible for the patch deploying that. they're going to have to go through this council and they're going to have to approve it. And the intention there is, you have responsible bug fixes, but you also never have the ability for that power to upgrade a protocol to be misused to potentially introduce a backdoor or some other issue. So it's something where you typically are sitting around for an entire year, nothing happens, and then suddenly everything's happening over the course of a weekend, and you're scrambling very quickly to make sure that you review and authorize a code upgrade before the issue potentially goes public.
And okay, cool. And you're suing the DOJ, but we'll get to that. I think so. We mentioned Tornado Cash has come up a couple times. The Ethereum privacy tool. Roman Storm, one of the developers, was recently convicted in the Southern District of New York for a crime called unlicensed money transmission. Would you say that the Tornado Cash conflict has caused a chilling effect?
I would say so. And I would probably go further back and say there was always a chilling effect as soon as like the industry and government started engaging early. And the engagement I think has actually gotten better recently, but they're like my personal anecdote is like having been, I made the mistake of starting a personal consultancy called Cryptocurrency LLC, and then suddenly realized that when you register with a bank and the first thing they see is cryptocurrency in the name of your business, they get very skeptical. And this is like 2015. This is when, if they had a policy on crypto, it was don't. That was their policy. Otherwise, they just were like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So like early on, I've had bank accounts where like I've been, one fun story is Wells Fargo let me have an account, and then 2 weeks later, the regional bank manager saw my file and then kicked me out, but I got to keep the $100 sign up fee. So it was okay there. But that's to say there's always been somewhat of a chilling effect, and there have always been like concerns around the way the law might be interpreted against developers' interests. I mean, like CoinCenter has been working on Blockchain Certainty Act for like more than 10 years because this is always a concern. Tornado Cash just realized that concern in like one of the potential worst case scenarios of a developer who, was not going out of their way to do something illegal, was trying to do it within the confines of the law and even within potential guidance, like FinCEN's guidance in 2019. But still, at least one of the many agencies out there, specifically the DOJ, decided to make an interpretation that unfortunately left them on the wrong side of the fence as someone who wasn't complying with law in their eyes, and then led to the prosecution. So it's always been there, but I would say it ratcheted up the chilling effect considerably to the point where a lot of developers felt more justified in either not building something or moving offshore to build something, or otherwise actually like maybe try to decentralize their protocol in specific ways that maybe weren't ideal and actually kind of undermined the project's goals, but they did so because they were concerned about the impact it could have on the developers or the team behind it because of this case.
And so something that has happened in the context of the Storm trial and then the Samurai wallet developers, the Department of Justice has taken a different interpretation than the Treasury as to what exactly is illegal. And I guess that kind of tees up the question of the panel, which is, why are you suing the DOJ?
Great question. The reason I'm suing the DOJ at the end of the day is I've got a very simple protocol that I've had banging around in my head for a while. It's basically like crowdfunding, but with smart contracts. It's like, okay, you can do what you do with crowdfunding, where you set a goal, you have people raise the money, and if you don't hit that goal, which would be like the activation point for you to actually do the thing, people can get their money back, so they don't end up just having to trust you to give the money back. Now, the whole thing that crowdfunding or like GoFundMe did is they came in and they said, okay, well, you can trust this third party to essentially, make sure the money is returned. But with smart contracts, you can make it even better, where you have a smart contract that'll guarantee the money gets returned if you don't hit the goal. And you can even program in more interesting things like milestones and matching from like larger donors and things like that. So it was like, okay, this would be a great protocol to build. You could make it very simple, immutable, non-custodial. But of course, and more importantly, because of course some people, like if you donate on crowdfund, you have that option of like, do I want people to see I've donated to this? Sometimes people want to brag about that. Other times people are like, I don't want to tell people I've done this. Having a privacy component. But if you introduce a privacy component, you immediately have to consider, well, what happened to the other two protocols that have implemented privacy, Samurai Wallet and Tornado Cash? Well, they're prosecuted not for having privacy, but for unlicensed money transmission, which seems to be like, well, just the stick that the DOJ happened to find to hit something they didn't like. So my lawsuit is really around, okay, I would like to be able to deploy this protocol, but I have considerable concerns about the implications if I did so with the feature sets of privacy, which, by the way, would be more to my users' benefit as a way to protect themselves than anything else. And so it's really down to the merit of like, hey, I don't feel like we have even had proper due process here. Like we're worried about like I'm basically worried about the fact that like if I do this, even if the current administration puts up their hand, they say, hey, don't worry, we're totally not going to prosecute you. They put out a memo to that effect going forward. It hasn't stopped the current cases of Samurai Wallet and Tornado Cash from moving forward. But the problem is that like it's a piece of paper. They could go back on their word. The next administration could ignore that entirely. So we're kind of in this place where like the best we can hope for is the DOJ just saying, trust me, bro, I won't prosecute anymore. And unfortunately, that's all we've gotten so far from the administration on this specific issue. And the hope is that with my lawsuit, like, okay, well, I would like to have an definitive answer from the court saying, no, they cannot do this anymore if you move forward because, you know, according to the guidance that's out there from the regulator on this issue of money transmission, you don't need to get a license because you are non-custodial. So the idea is hopefully getting that enshrined as like a court precedent that would protect me and hopefully also protect others. And if not, then hopefully Blockchain Certainty Act would also do that. But that's what the court case is around, is like ultimately I'm worried about the harm already caused by trying to do this, and then the obvious harm that would come if I did it and was prosecuted unfairly for it.
The Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act has come up a couple times. Can you just explain what that is?
Yeah, I mean, Coin Center has written lots of great details on this, so go to their blog and read more. But and it's part of the Clarity Act that has been passed in the House and hopefully gets passed in the Senate. But essentially, it's down to like carving out like who actually is going to have money transmission or kind of custodial requirements placed upon them, and carving out a clear area where self-custodial wallets don't apply, custodial and immutable smart contracts don't apply, node operators don't apply. Basically, like carving out a lot of things that we all intuitively should. Most of the people probably in this room intuitively understand are not like custodial money transmission businesses, but making it absolutely clear. And I think with money transmission and a few other key issues, but basically making sure that like we kind of update the law, you know, laws like money transmission that was written like 40, 50 years ago, whatever it is now, that we make it very clear these laws that were written in a very the olden times are not going to apply to technology that a regulator might confuse them for, but actually, you know, shouldn't apply because you ultimately don't have control or other things that should make it applicable. So it's just clarifying the law for new sorts of technology today.
Right. So what is the status of your case at this point? What's going on with it?
We're sitting tight. I've been working with the lawyers, and we filed in January early on during the Biden administration. The Trump administration picked it up. We had a bit of a gap there, and then now we've gone through essentially fighting the government's motion to dismiss, basically trying to say I don't have standing. And we've pushed back on that, saying like there's clearly been cases where this would prevent me and other developers from moving forward with deploying this. There is harm caused. There is standing. What do you want me to do? Deploy the protocol and then get criminally prosecuted, and then I have standing? Okay, great. So we've been doing that back and forth. We luckily got an amicus brief, or gratefully got an amicus brief filed by a lot of folks like DeFi Education Fund and Paradigm and some other folks in the space. And now we're waiting for the judge to rule really on like that particular motion, and then if that motion ultimately gets denied in the sense that I'm allowed to move forward with the case, then, well, we go to the next set of kind of pretrial motions, and hopefully it continues to make progress from there. So we're only a year into the lawsuit, or less than a year into the lawsuit.
Cool. So I actually I've asked all my questions that I wanted to on stage, and so we have 6 minutes left in this session and plenty of time for a couple questions if anyone in the audience has questions for Michael.
Gotcha.
Thank you for the panel. So I'm sure you're familiar with privacy pools. It's this solution that emerged after Tornado Cash, which allows normal users of mixers to disassociate from the assets of known bad actors. So my question to you is, where do you think mitigations like privacy pools fits in here? Do you think it would appease regulators? Do you think it would improve security for normal users?
Yeah, good question. So I like privacy pools a lot in general, like as a concept, and the implementation being worked on by Expo and those projects. So I think the short answer is yes. I think it does improve. One, it improves the way to show to regulators, hey, these protocols are going out of their way to try to avoid bad actors from taking advantage of them. And I think it also gives a lot more, it just gives more optionality potentially to the people building on top of the protocol. So for example, with my protocol, my intention is not to have a lot of control over exactly how these campaigns are run, but I want to be able to ensure that, like, okay, if someone starts a fundraising campaign and they want to say, okay, I want to make sure that I have, people can donate privately, but I don't want to have anyone on the OFAC list. I don't want to have anyone who maybe has specific risk factors. We're still in early stages on like how I've architected it, but I want there to be a path for someone to be able to like choose the compliance they want. Because ultimately, if I'm not the one custodying the funds, nor am I receiving the funds, the person receiving the funds is the one who ultimately, assuming the government decides not to just save time going after all the people raising money, just come after me as the one who's deployed the code. If they want to go after the individual receiving the money, the individual is the one taking that risk, then they can say, okay, listen, I want to make sure that I can prove to the government that when I've raised money, that none of the people who have sent that money to me, even if they're private and I can't track them, can prove that none of that money came from someone on the OFAC list or someone who is potentially engaged in money laundering or high risk activity. So I like the fact that privacy pools allows for that. I think it does introduce a bit more complexity because you have to have a bit of a waiting period and assessment and a proof of innocence kind of component into it, which is why I would still probably make it optional and try to ensure that there's some ways to program that for the specific case, because some people might want or need more compliance or more compliance checks than others. But simply having the option in the first place, I think, is a big step forward from where we were with Tornado Cash, which they had their own compliance tool, but it was generally on the individual moving money through Tornado Cash to then be able to prove to anyone they interact with from there on out that, like, hey, this is, I could prove that my money when it came through Tornado Cash was not connected to any criminal activity. But I think privacy pools goes one step further by saying, like, we can actually guarantee that nothing in the privacy pool was related to money laundering or criminal activity. And that's even better because then there isn't this concept of it might have been mixed at some point with criminal funds.
Any other questions? One over here.
Gotcha. 1 second.
Can you please elaborate on terms of what we are still missing from cybersecurity standpoint when it comes to integrate Web 2 and Web 3 and what's needed to be done to actually build this digital asset infrastructure securely?
It's a good question. I'd probably, like, working at Turnkey, I can probably just, shill that, which is to say, I think the ability for users to have non-custodial control of assets without putting themselves at risk of mismanaging key material or misunderstanding how to properly custody those funds. Because the biggest issue that we typically see, a lot of things that Casey and Sam and others were talking about previously were around, like, how do users get scammed and how do they lose access to funds? And usually, sometimes it's like they send money to the wrong person. It's hard to protect against that, but, like, outside of just better education and maybe some controls on, the elderly or children or others that, might need like someone who can authorize transactions over a certain amount. But I think also, like, a lot of people don't realize they're engaging in risky behavior. Like, some of the attack vectors we see is, like, someone goes to a website and it's like, hey, if you just sign up here, you'll get access to an airdrop. They don't realize they're even doing anything related to authorizing transfer of funds. But if you look at the transaction details under the hood, which can be very difficult to decode, even for developers and practically impossible for non-technical users, it turns out, I'm actually giving access to all my Tether or all my USDC and then essentially getting rugged. So we need a lot more, I think, better protections around that, both in terms of, like, okay, like, lots of checks in there for us to be able to, like, okay, is the person I'm interacting with a trusted party? Are they related? Are they related to any criminal activity that might be scamming people? Ideally detecting that before someone has even been scammed. And then on top of that, like, the key material itself, making sure that these are not private keys that are sitting, on someone's laptop in plain text, that they haven't backed up their seed phrase and just copy pasted it into Google Drive, or done, like, a variety of other things that will expose them to risks that they're not even fully aware of. So, like, I'm at the point where I think, like, people should be able to get the same sort of experience they get with Coinbase, hopefully better. In terms of being able to use things like their Google Authenticator, their passkeys, a combination of authentication methods that they're much more familiar with, rather than having to directly control a wallet and a seed phrase and a backup, which is what we're building at Turnkey. Because ultimately, like, it's unrealistic to expect the majority of people out there to know how to handle key material directly, responsibly. People should always have the option to do so, but for those that can't or don't know how, we have options that allow them to still be non-custodial, but they can use authentication methods that they're familiar with and are going to be easier to protect at the end of the day.
Well, I think we'll end there. Thank you so much, Michael. It's great.
Thank you.